Excellent. Thank you. So excited to talk about object-oriented UX and the Orca process. Hopefully it'll be a really brief look at the tools and the process that we follow. It's kind of a workshop, but very, very brief touching on it. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll get an idea that how it can be used to help you understand, the complexity of the projects you're working on, and how it can be used to develop applications that are easier to use. They're intuitive to the user. They fit the user's requirements, and they're easier to maintain. The Orca process is, I think we talk about that a little later. I am doing a presentation in Miro. Everything will be in Miro, and I've never done this before, so we may have some other pieces to go through.
Yeah, bear with us.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Organic.
I'm in a safe space. There you go. So, yeah, I'm Richard Gower. I've actually been I'm a developer. I'm not really a designer, although I've had to design some of the things that we develop. I've been doing this for at least 40 years, a little bit more maybe. I've been actually Sherry and I with the early days of UXSA, and before that, a couple of years with Bob and when we were meeting downtown and a couple other places and stuff. So I've been kind of touching in and out with UXA for several years now. My background is a developer, but recently this year I got certified as an OUX certified strategist, which is what we're talking about tonight. I'm also currently on the advanced strategist certification course, which is just started. It's brand new, and we're actually helping develop it. And I'm currently mentoring the cohort 9 of the strategists going through the certification process. So if I sound a little confused, it's because I'm not sure who I'm talking to. So gotta do a little bit. And Molly.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for having me, first of all. I am Molly Lentz, and I'm currently a senior web designer at 4imprint in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. 4imprint is primarily like a business-to-business promotional product company, so a lot of e-commerce stuff. I focus on the front end development, so a lot of accessibility and JavaScript and Sass, CSS, sketching and prototyping, all that good stuff. Outside of work, I actually love illustrating. That's something that I do every night just to kind of de-stress. And I actually was lucky enough to license some of my artwork to like TJ Maxx and Trader Joe's this last year, which was exciting. So that's just a little bit about me. And I like how on the bio for this this meetup, it said that I liked to eat. I don't know if anybody read that.
Yeah. So before we start, actually, just kind of set the scene a little bit. I know Bob would probably appreciate a little story to start with. So if we imagine before we showed up, when we first showed up into this room today, which was at scattered times of everything, but if we walked into this room and then nothing was clear, we couldn't make out the chairs or the tables, we couldn't make out the different objects in this room, couldn't find the light switches, everything was kind of merged together. And then we've got to kind of like search, we got to kind of really work hard, and eventually, maybe we find the light switch, and it's like, wait a minute, does that turn the lights on? Oh, actually, this is probably a true story. Does it turn the computer on? Which is the switch for that? But eventually, okay. Oh yeah, I found a chair. Now, wait a minute, is someone sitting in it? I can't tell because it's all kind of fuzzy and it's not clear. But then I do finally find a chair, and it's like, well, which table is it connected to? It's like, all the confusion, everything else like this. So take that and think about the websites you go to. There's oftentimes you go in there and you go, what am I looking at? How do I buy that object? Or I would like to make a reservation right now, but I can't. So the whole idea is can we get past that confusion? Can we make sure that those objects that we want to touch, the chairs, the tables, the light switches, they're all really clear and that the user can see them real easy? Can we make sure that the light switch that turns the light on and the switch that turns the computer on are clearly defined? And hopefully the goal of a lot of this, the OOUX process, the ORCA process, is to help us kind of get to that thing and make sure that when we're designing applications for people, that those things are a lot more clear. So setting that, let's kind of have a look at it a little bit here. Sorry. The development goals of an application, we want the app to be easy to understand. We want it to be intuitive. We want people to know what they're looking at. So from the story, you know, we want to see the chairs, we want to see the tables, we want everyone to know what they are. And it's based on the user who's using it. So it's coming from their perspective. We can't often come up with a design that is so way out there that they can't relate. Some of the things that we're looking at, things that are the same, look the same. Things that are different, look different. Don't confuse people and have two things that look exactly the same. And when you click on it, bam, it goes and does something completely different. So we're looking for consistency and predictable behavior.
That's right. That was a good summary right there. So a lot of you probably know what object-oriented UX is, but we're just going to kind of summarize it right now. Basically, as human beings, our brains are wired to think in objects. That's how we look at our real life, the real world. So OUX is really trying to align your digital world with what you see in the real world and the way that we think. That way, your digital space is going to be a lot more intuitive. Like Richard was saying, it's going to be way easier for the user to use once they go to it. And it's important to remember that it's not things like your calendar picker that we're designing. We're not doing your drop downs or any of like the UI elements. This is more so like your top level, very important things to the business. So it's going to inform your design system. And then it brings us to ORCA. So what is ORCA? This is something that might be new. It was new to me when I started taking the certification course. So this is Sophia Prater's iterative OOUX process. And this really allows us to really dig in and get so many of our questions answered right up off the, right when you start working on something, instead of like later on when you have all of your mock-ups designed. And we've all kind of been there where we have a lot of mock-ups and all of a sudden you realize that there's this question that needs to be answered and everything sort of has to be redone. And it's this domino effect, which causes a lot of time and rework and frustration. So just like a general idea of what ORCA stands for, O stands for objects, R stands for relationships, C stands for calls to action, and A stands for attributes. The really fun part about ORCA, wait a minute, Richard. We gotta talk about the fun part, which is the sticky notes. So there's different colored sticky notes that you're going to be using. Basically, the blue ones represent objects. The yellow ones represent core content. The green ones represent your calls to action. And the pink ones represent metadata, which we will dig into more later, but just general overview.
So in a nutshell, what ORCA is, it's 4 rounds. And in each round, or the first 3 rounds, we go through the objects, relationships, the calls to action, and the attributes, and kind of look at those in turn. Now, you get taught it and you go, okay, we do it step by step. If you really do it, you start realizing it's iterative and you jump backwards and forwards, and each piece actually informs some other pieces. So you are going backwards and forwards. But for the main thing is the discovery round. We go through first, we find the objects, we map the relationships, we find the CTAs, and then we add the attributes to those objects. Nice and easy. This is fairly straightforward. Then round 2, we do it all over again. And we drill really deep. and you come up with some really, really heavy stuff. This is kind of like, and sometimes it's a little tough, but you're trying to really get into the nitty gritty of what your objects, relationships, CTAs, and attributes are, and how they relate to each other. Round 3 is more of a prioritization. There's 2 pieces to the prioritization. We want to map out the phases. So maybe, although I've identified 6 objects I want to put into my application, 2 of them, the business isn't so worried about immediately. So we'll push those off. And because we're pushing those objects off, there's certain calls to action, there's certain relationships with the existing objects that we do want to build that will get pushed off as well. So we kind of prioritize those. The other thing on the prioritization is what's important to the user. So when we look at our objects and when we look at the attributes and the calls to actions for the user, which ones do they want to get to quickly? So we want to give, if there's some attributes, some information they want are more important for them to see, we want them to get to them quicker. So by prioritizing that, we can now say, well, that could go down on a later screen, or maybe lower down on the screen, or maybe it needs to be elevated to the top of the screen because it's more important. So that's kind of the prioritization round. And then the representation round, we start getting into the sketching. We start doing some simple sketches of how it could look. And it's not so much how the end screen is going to look, but it's trying to look at where are the placement, what screens go where, how do we connect things up, and that we're hitting the right things, because then we do some prototyping, we can sit there and see how it all flows together, and then we can do some user testing and get the user to say, yes, those are the important things to me. This is the flow I'm expecting. We're not trying to do usability in the sense of we built detailed screens, hi-fi screens. That's not the purpose of this. The output from all of this goes into that process to help design those screens. So hopefully that answers you. This is the actual diagram that Sophia has that shows the ORCA steps and how they all tie together. So if you go through a course or you go through a Udemy course, you'll see a lot of this. And as you can see, she's got the colors and everything else like that. And then so at the end of it, like I was saying, what are the questions that we're asking, especially with the testing, is what and how we get there. What objects are in the user's mental model? What do they see? You know, we don't want to kind of create things that they're not expecting. What relationships do the objects have with each other? How do they interact? How do they play? What are the calls to actions the objects are offering? And then what attributes make up these objects? So those are the questions that we try to ask. We go through the discovery phase and try to answer those. And I think one of the important things about this process, we're not just trying to come up with the products, we're trying to generate the questions that we should be asking, and trying to find the things that we're missing. So it's kind of like a tool to try to dig deep and find out what we're missing. So now let's have a quick look at what we're going to do. So we've got a small project that we're going to design tonight. It's a design hub. So it's a comprehensive app. It's designed to streamline the process of managing our customer interactions, tracking project progress, recording design responses for the UX and the UI designers. The app aims to enhance collaboration and organization and communication within design projects. Pretty good goal. We're going to do it in 30 minutes. Yeah, right. And just a little bit of information. So it's user-friendly environment. It enables the UX UI designers. So we've got some text. I actually went to ChatGPT and said, hey, tell me some stuff that we want, and tell us some requirements based on different users. So it's, you know, it's going to be a simple app. And our challenge is to go through OUX and design and deliver some screens at the end. And hopefully you'll feel that you kind of accomplished that at the end of this.
Okay. We're going to dive into the first step, which is object discovery. And this is probably one of my favorite steps. So you're going to be identifying all of the key core objects to your project here. Objects, it's important to remember, are kind of like a cookie cutter. So when you use a cookie cutter, you have all these cookies that you're cutting out, and the cookies are your instances of that object. Or another way to look at it is like if you have a restaurant object, your instances of a restaurant would be things like McDonald's or Taco Bell or whatever you have. And it's also important to remember that, you know, objects should look the same that are the same, and they should look different if they're different, like Richard was saying before. So it just doesn't cause any confusion for the user. So here we go. We have some documentation here from different people in the company. They're writing about this app that we are about to design. And this is a great way. You want to gather up as much information as you can from different sources like documentation, maybe from chat logs, or even like your competition out there. You can go on their websites and gather up some information, but you're going to go through it now and look for the nouns. So think about people, places, and things. And what we do is we just highlight them. It just makes it really quick. So you would go through the text and highlight different nouns. I don't know if anybody wants to like find
Throw some
one.
out.
Yeah.
You want to throw some out?
See if they find anything in there.
Yeah, so we got customer. Well, that was actually supposed to be saved, the customer details. So
What else we got? Project.
company. Yep. Contact info. Okay, yeah, that is. This is a little slow, isn't it? But what was that? You have to speak up. Oh. Oh yeah. Oh, we're getting some in here. Oh, I'm not seeing them. So anyway, so we could go through, and then what we do is obviously then we'd say, you know, we'd start putting down here and say, oh yes, I've got customer. And just start filling out all my blue squares, because you remember blue is with objects. And we'd go through and we'd say, okay, manage details of projects. Oh, good. That sounds like something I should do. We want to ignore the verbs at the moment, the more actions. Actions. They could be call to actions that we may want to look at later, right? So right now we go through all of this. Now, surprisingly, we've already got something that we've kind of already done something with. So if you have a look at this, we've actually gone through, highlighted some of the things that we'd identified, and in our examples, we may have missed some, but you know, it gives you a good example. So we've been throwing, you know, interaction, user, designer, project, response. We would think customer, billing, task. Maybe they're good objects, maybe they're not. But at the moment, we're just looking to try to find a whole load of nouns that we could do. The next thing we want to do. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, for me, when I'm given all of like the technical details of a project that I'm going to work on, it can kind of be like really overwhelming and a lot to read through to try and figure it all out and kind of understand it. I always find like this is such a great way to really like take it down into simple terms and come away with something at the end, as opposed to like spending, you know, days reading through it and trying to figure it out. It's a really helpful trick, I think.
And there are some tools out there that will go through your text and search out and look out for nouns. And will then list them by the quantity, the count, as to how often they're used. That's cheating, right?
I need that tool.
Yeah. So
now we're going to do some object consolidation now that we have all of our sticky notes. you might notice that some of them maybe are talking about the same thing. And that's kind of something that happens in companies a lot. And maybe you've experienced that where different people are talking about the same thing, but they're using a different word when they're describing it. So a lot of times that causes a lot of confusion within the company. So this is going to kind of, you get your team together, you get stakeholders together, you decide what that thing should be called. What's the right term for it? So we're going to kind of go through. I know that there's project, design. That could be something. I don't know if a design and a project is the same. So that would be something you could discuss. Let's see. Response and maybe feedback could be a similar thing.
Customer, client, user, designer. There's some, yeah, there's a lot of kind of people things, right?
Yeah.
There's another customer. Oh, there, right. There you go. Yeah, and then, you know, so as we go through this, we start looking at our nouns and start, okay, let's make sense of it. And one of the big things about OUX, words are important. I think, you know, Sherry's going to go, of course, words are important. You know, you got to get it right. And I think we've all been in user meetings or whatever and discussing with them, and you suddenly realize they're saying two different things using the same word, or, you know, they're saying the same thing with two different terms. Exactly. Yep. And that gets confusing, especially when you expect, you know, the developers to code something and you're going, wait a minute, you're giving me three different words. What, are these the same thing? Are they different? So what we're trying to do with this object consolidation is to try to identify what the names are. And it's hard. Doesn't mean you can't go back and change them later, but yeah, words are important and it's hard. We do talk a little bit about structure, instance, and purpose. If we're going to have an object we want to keep in our system, it must have some kind of structure. It must have attributes. It must have things that we want to store on it. There must be instances. We must have, it's like, you know, okay, if I was to have a table object, oh, am I going to have instances of tables? You know, well, okay, we know in here we have 7 tables. Okay, there are instances. You know, do they have structure? Well, maybe they got color, maybe got number of legs, number of people that considered it. You know, purpose. Is it needed in my system? We could come up with all these objects, but some of these we may find, like scope or deadline, maybe they're not relevant to the application that we're building. So they may be valid objects, but they may not be something that's important. So surprisingly, we've already done something along those lines. And we've kind of pulled it together and we've kind of said, okay, I've got a designer, I've got a client. We separated them too. They're both people, but we thought they feel different anyway, because the designer is doing work in my system and the client is I'm doing work for them. Could I put them as a user? Maybe. It's something we could discuss. But right now we'll keep them here. We can always eliminate them later if we need to. Response is feedback and response and interaction. So response is kind of like, I have given a file. We were using the word file is something that a designer builds and sends to a client, and we get feedback on the file. Simple as that. Project design and scope. Well, we have a project has tasks. We create files for that project or for that task. We give them to a client and then we invoice them. So, okay, these feel pretty good based on what we've got. It's a very simple system. So we're feeling good. That's object discovery, I think.
Hopefully that makes sense to people. Oh, we have to do the object instancing, I think, yet. Do we care about that?
Did we miss them down at the bottom? You're right. Thank you.
It should be pretty quick.
Yep.
There we go. Yes. So this is kind of like the cookie cutter thing and coming up with the cookies. This is a great way to sort of brainstorm what, the real world object would look like. So for instance, with our designer object, your instance, you would just write in there like my name or one of your names. That would be an example. Or, you know, for a project, what would you call it? Like something rebranding, whatever the company's name is. You just come up with ideas of like, what would this actually look like or be called? What would its name be?
So we've got something that we can use as an example, right? So obviously we've filled some of those in. A response could be it's approved, it needs work, you may have comments or something. The file, here's the name of the file. You know, project is Best Buy branding refresh. Just something that like, when you bring other people into the project, because projects take time, you usually get people to onboard, the people leave. Real nice to be able to say, hey, look, you can get up to speed pretty fast on some of this stuff. And then one other thing we actually do
Ooh.
is we look at saying, okay, what kind of lists are these? And usually they're just like, oh, a list of projects is projects. But there might be other lists that we want to do. So it's just kind of like just putting a little more definition around the objects that we've defined. And here they were pretty straightforward projects. And obviously completed projects would be another list that we might have projects in. Designers, files, responses. Sometimes the list is not as obvious. Let's say if I had events, it might be my list is a calendar, right? It could be, or you know, or appointments would be my list would be a calendar. So you know, just kind of like just again, it's just trying to kind of put some structure around what we're looking at.
Gives you an
Okay,
idea
I
of
think we.
how you might want to group your objects too on a certain page or that kind of stuff.
Okay, so now relationship discovery. So what we're trying to look at is how do the different objects that we've identified in the previous step, how do they relate to each other? And we describe the cardinality. Cardinality is just a fancy word for saying, oh, I have many children, or I have one child, or I have one wife, I have 0 wives. You know, it's that's the cardinality. And we talk about the relationship. So I have 2 sons, but my son has 1 father and 1 mother, or you know, to start with. So you know, that's kind of like how we kind of talk a little bit about the relationships. And then so you know, Sophia brings up that if there are a relationship between these 2 objects, you should be able to get access to that object through the one that has a relationship to it. So talking about me and my son, if you want to talk to my son, you can come to me and you can talk to my son. That's a little bit abstract, but the idea being is we do expect to be able to do that. So and then it'll make a little more sense when we kind of go further. So and this actually is the stuff I enjoy. It's a lot more developerish. So system modeling, we start trying to put together the objects. We put the little blue boxes on there, and we start drawing arrows between them, and then we start talking about the relationships. If you're a developer, you probably know these lines are usually crow's feet. Sophia prefers to put an arrow, and then she kind of talks about has 1, has 0 to 1, has 0 to many, or has 1 to many relationships. So like we point out, relationships are bidirectional, 2-directional. And this gets really, really busy really fast. So you want to keep your objects to a minimum. Very rarely do you want to draw one of these with all of your objects. You might do it for just like 2 or 3 just to see how they play. So here is what we have for the 4 objects that we kind of identified. So a project has 1 to many designers. Actually, before, you know, when the project first starts, it might have 0. So we could say, does it have to support? And a designer is assigned to 0 to many projects. A designer worked on 0 to M files, or file was designed by 1 user. So we already made some assumptions that, okay, only 1 person can work on a file. This may generate that question going, wait a minute, can I have multiple designers? So already by doing some of these things, we can start generating those questions, which user researchers, you know, like getting into, they go, okay, what do you really want? So that will allow us to do that. So this is, you kind of build this out. I think this is fairly straightforward, but you can see it's really busy once everything has a relationship to everything else. Response is showing that it has a relationship to itself. So I could have responses to responses. So if you think about Facebook, you put a post, someone's going to put a comment, and then someone's going to comment, and someone's going to comment, and then comment. So, you know, usually you have comments that can have comments to comments. So, so that is kind of the first thing we do in looking at the relationships.
And me not being a developer, that part always kind of confused me, whereas this makes it a little bit more straightforward in my head. This is the nested object matrix, or in other words, the NOM. And this is really where you're getting to explore even more relationships between two objects. And like Richard was saying before, the object could have a relationship with itself. So you're really kind of digging in even further. This is going to come up or bring up a lot of questions, which is a very good thing. You want a lot of questions to come up now so that you can kind of get some clarity on that. This could also bring up ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about, or maybe the team didn't think about at all. And it might, or it could be really useful for the user. So you really want to explore, think of all the different possibilities that these could be related to each other. You might come up with multiple relationships between them. So across the top, you have your objects, and then across the bottom, or I guess the side going down, that is your nested objects. So you want to read it kind of like a sentence. So like at the top, you have project. And then if you go down one space, it's a project. So you're going to say a project has X amount of projects within it. And then the next one is a project has, you know, however many designers that are working on it. So you sort of go through each one. It gets tricky. It is tricky. Like you have to make sure you keep your accesses right while you're doing it, but always try to read it like a sentence like that. So you're just trying to define the relationships. So I don't know, does a project relate to a project, another project? I don't know if that's something that you could think of a relationship there. I mean, maybe,
Yeah, and
maybe if this client has requested a project in the past from you or something like that. So past projects.
or you could have maybe similar size projects, or you know, it's for a similar customer, you know, right? So,
Yep. Or yeah, it's
and I think
complicated.
we've got the one here that's kind of filled out a little bit. There we go. So just give you an example. And like we said, this project has 0 to M similar size projects, 0 to M projects for the same client. And you know, you can make these, you can come up with lots and lots of these, but it does get you start thinking. And then you're like, if you got a box that's empty, then you go, wait a minute, is there a relationship between, you know, the file and the designer? Well, of course, a file has one designer who uploaded it. You know, the response has one designer writing it. So, you know, it does give you a chance to kind of sit and understand that. And it is a little easier than the system map that we had, where we're drawing lots and lots of arrows.
Less noodles.
Yeah.
So what are the things that we are defining as a strategy we're defining it for ourselves in this project, in the, you know, object oriented UX, we're trying to define whether it's a organization or zero, you know, or just one that we're deciding this and we're hitting.
Well, we're designing, but if you don't know for sure, if it's an assumption, you're going to go back to the user to understand that, right? Yeah, exactly. And that's an excellent point, because it's like, wait a minute, of course I assume, you know, it's one. But you know, it's like, oh, but if it's many, then somewhere in the app, I'm going to need a list as opposed to just a line item, right? So those are the things that you want to ask. And hopefully, you know, the more people that look at now, a lot of these, it's not you doing it by yourself, you're doing it with teams and everything else working on it. No, no, you're trying to look at what is in the real world. So I guess, I know we started late, so we'll try and speed up a little bit, but.
Yeah. So here is
Okay.
where you'd start to dig into some of those actions. So you're going to want to identify actions that different roles can take on the object. So if you think about maybe an admin, they might be able to create and delete objects, whereas a user just coming to the site wouldn't be able to do those things. So really defining that, and it's important that we know what actions are available to the user so that we know what needs to be there and where we need to place them, because you're going to want them to be close to your nested objects in that it needs to be connected to the objects so they're easy to find.
Yeah, call to action was one of those things when everyone kept talking, as a developer, everyone was talking about call to actions. Yeah, you don't know this, Molly, but when I was sitting in the course, I had no clue what anyone was talking to. It's like, what the heck is a call to action? It was like, it's like, so. Well, they kept on using CTA. Everyone said CTA, and it's like, oh my gosh, this has got, what's a CTA? It's like, it took me a while to get to that. So anyway, so here is the first step of defining the calls to action is to find the roles. So we want to find the primary roles, the distinct roles that are in our system that are going to be interacting. Now, just to be clear, these are not personas. So they're not personas that you define. These are distinct roles that would probably, the computer would know is different and has distinct actions or displays or whatever in the system. Obviously, a persona goes in, the computer's not going to know about the persona, right? But this is a distinct role. So if you want to throw a role or two out that we might have, an admin, you could have a system admin, we could have a project admin, right? You could have two different types of admins. Exactly. We got the designer. We know we have the designer. We know we have the client. Do they have a role in this? Are they going to be using the app? Don't know. But that brings up some questions. So these are the ones that we did come up with: project manager, a designer, the customer, and the system admin. We could probably come up with some more. We decided to keep them fairly small. So I'm guessing, this is me. We got a little color coding at the bottom as to who's talking about it. So the CTA matrix. So again, we love our matrices. Okay, we saw that with the nested object matrix. Let me put the objects across the top. Let me put the roles down the side, and now I can look at what are the actions that role can play on that object, right? Now, what's nice about the matrix is we shouldn't miss any role per object interaction. And some hints here. Let's go back to those verbs. What were the verbs? Someone's going to design. Oh, good. So a designer. Add list of awards won. Edit. Oh, these were examples from the previous thing before we put the titles in. So a designer will maybe submit a project or maybe sign into a project. They create a file. They may delete a file. They may update a file. The project manager may create the project. No one else is creating the project. It's the project manager's job. Or maybe it's the system admin. I don't know, but we start defining them on this matrix. So again, it's just a matter of clarifying things. And here's some that we kind of put in. So here, the designer can upload a file to a project. Designer can send a response to a file. A designer can create. CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So we don't break it out too much at this point, but we are including it because this comes in later as to who has permission to do things to objects. Because we're going to find later that maybe someone can't delete it. Bless you. In Facebook example, you can create a post. You can delete a post. Okay. Bob can come and look at your post and respond to your post, but he can't delete your post. These are important things that we want to be able to map. That's when we get into, the requirements and the deep drill down. So we've got a number of CTAs that we've now put on our solution. So now we're beginning to flesh it out. We've got the objects, we've got the relationships, and we've got our CTAs.
Be good. Now
So
we're
what do we
on
have to do now, Molly?
the good old attribute discovery. This is where we are going to get all of the information that we need about our object. So that's going to include core content, metadata, and the nested objects, which you've actually already defined from your object matrix. So something that's kind of tricky, at least for me in the beginning, was differentiating between core content and metadata. So something that I use to kind of help me with that is that core content is unique to the object. So let's say our object is a user. They are going to have a name, and that's going to be unique to them. Nobody else is going to have that name usually. And they'll have like a profile picture. That would be core content because that's unique too. Metadata, on the other hand, is what we're used to sorting and filtering by on websites. So it's something that can be shared across multiple objects. It could be shared across multiple instances. So if we think about that user object, it'd be something like age. So, you know, I'm 40, and there's probably other people that are 42. That's a great way to remember the difference between the two.
Yeah, and it becomes more important later because you kind of use the metadata when you're kind of saying, do I need to filter or do I need to sort? And, you know, so that it kind of gets in helpful later.
Mm-hmm. This is the exciting part, guys.
Oh, we both talk on this one. I'll let you start.
I feel bad because you're doing the whole like moving it around. So here is where we're listing our objects across the top. And we're just going to brainstorm, you know, different things that could be their core content and different things that might show up as metadata for them. So let's just take like our project, for example. What would be something that you could think of for core content on that? We have some hints over on the right side. So yeah, it's name for sure. It's going to have a description. I don't know. What else?
What about the items like photo, video that don't necessarily have to have?
That it doesn't have to have the optional, you mean? Yeah, we'd still include it. So, you know, it's like, yeah, maybe you'll have a profile picture. So, you know, a designer, you know, could have, there you go. A designer could have a profile picture, but may not. At this point, we're not going to do that. When we get into the requirements, we'll now start saying, is it required or is it optional? You know, where does it come from? That's why this discovery phase is kind of nice. You're like, oh, you don't have to worry about that yet. And then you start drilling down and you start mapping, you know, what is. So yeah. So, you know, the photo for the designer, and obviously he's got a name as well, you know, first name, last name, and everything else. And an example of metadata for a designer. I guess it could be something like maybe job title could be. Well, the bio will be core content because the bio is unique to them. Okay. I mean, if we were tracking age of designers and we wanted to say, job title could,
Skills.
exactly. So if you had senior or, you know, advanced or research or whatever, billing rate. Yeah. So the bill rate, you know, that would be a good one that we would do.
Gun and Uber. The guy asked, "Are you Jewish?"
Okay, so bill rate's a good opportunity because you might want to say, you may want to filter by, oh, who am I charging more than $100 for? You know, it doesn't have to be an equal on the filter, right? You could have ranges. It's like, you know, 0 to 100, 100 to 200 or whatever. So you kind of fill this out, and I wouldn't be surprised if we already have one filled out.
Ta-da.
So there we go. So
That's
we got a
pretty
couple
simple.
here. that we did for the project, the design in the file, design a name, their skills. We're going to skills because, you know, maybe, you know, the designer is good at creating animated GIFs, or I don't know. See, I'm not a designer. I don't know what kind of you have skills. You have skills. But anyway, so the project, you know, okay, we're actually looking at this as a fixed price, right? So we're putting the project the price in that, and that is metadata, because we may want to search on all the projects that cost more than this or less than this. And then what do? We put it all together. And so the object at the top, and then we got the attributes, and the nested objects, and the CTAs all. And now this becomes really important. This is the start of our object map that we're going to use for much later. So now we've finished all the original steps. So now we come to the requirements, and this is where we are drilling really deep. And there's a number of different products. We're not going to go into detail because we could spend, you know, a whole couple hours on the requirements and just the deliverables from the requirements phase. But we start off an object guide, so we start, you know, defining and putting a good description. We want to make sure that people that come into this project later can catch up. We don't want to duplicate everything. We want to make sure it's in one place. So like we say, the object guide is a glossary. We actually look at the relationships, and we break down the mechanics, the cardinality, the sorting, filtering, and dependencies on this relationship. So we go into even more detail. So the cardinality is one to many. Okay, what's many? You know, what's an average? What's a maximum? This becomes really important when you're defining your screens. It's like, am I going to have page after page after page of 100 items, 100 items, 100 items, or do I only have 3? Many is 3. Okay, do I need filtering at that point? So pagination, all of these things, they come in. So now during this phase, we start trying to do this. The mechanics, how do they really get created? You know, what causes them to arrive? And there's other places it goes into real deep looking in. When you start looking at the roles, it's like, what is their motivation for doing this? How are they feeling, and why do they want to do this? And it's trying to kind of really drill down. The CTA matrix does help start defining the user stories. And then we start coming in with, I think we were talking about, is it optional? Conditional logic. This field is needed or not. What about relationships between fields? If that field here is on, these fields are not on. You know, it's like, if I'm an admin, I can see these fields in this other object. Oh my gosh, it gets complex. But you start trying to document this. Now, usually we're not just doing little, you know, nice little colored boxes on a whiteboard. We're now moved into something a lot more robust. Sophia has built a very robust system in using Notion. Amazing what she's done in that. I actually used Airtable for my project. I had to kind of build that from scratch. There are templates and things out there. Just to give you a bit of an idea, I don't know how familiar you are with Airtable, but here's a kind of thing that I done. This was my list of attributes. You can see my attributes are here. This is a CTA. Actually, there's more than just attributes, but this is the CTA. So hide a post as a CTA. This is metadata. So these are part of the attributes. These are my nested objects. Put all my relationships and everything inside of this Airtable. And then I started putting other things, user priorities. You know, is it conditional? You know, and it was conditional on role. So this made sense to me because okay, if I'm an admin, I can see it, but if I'm not an admin, I can't see it. So that was the kind of things that we kind of did. This is why you start needing a database. The other thing that they build, we'd love to spend some time on this, but not going to. Oh, it's a little out of focus. This is called a nav flow. Basically, what a nav flow tries to do is to show how you can move through the system between screens. And it's based on object. So the color coding is now based on an object. So this is actually a nav flow from the application I built during the course. And it's kind of showing that, you know, up here is kind of like the menu item is at the top. And then this would bring a list. These are the filtered items. I know you can't really see it real clearly. But these are the list items. You click on that and then it would jump over to the detail card. So this starts showing kind of a very, very cool idea. But we don't have time for it.
It's kind of like
I thought
the internet archive.
that's what it kind of reminded me of.
Yeah.
You're kind of building the, you know, you're
Finding.
looking at something and going through and analyzing these analogies after all those.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Almost-
You could build something there. But I think, yeah, the information architecture, trying to put the menu structure together. Yes, it is kind of leading towards that. Okay, so that is the requirements step. And real quick on the prioritization, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure,
Molly?
yeah. So this is what's really going to set us up for success when it comes to sketching, which is going to be the next step. So we're almost there. Now that we have our object map that we put together, we're going to kind of move all of those stickies around up and down to prioritize what's most important to the object and to the system that we're building. So, you know, you might actually decide that an object might not even be needed and it's not very important. You didn't have a lot of attributes for it or something. So you might actually completely remove an object. You might decide that an object really doesn't need to be in the system right now, but maybe in future releases. So you could downgrade that object to be metadata instead. You'd want to keep your little object map of it off to the side, just, you know, so that you have that all mapped out already for your future release. So it's kind of nice because it gives you a roadmap of where you might want to take this in the future. It also, let's see, he was talking about the nav flow thing that really helps with this too. What else can we cover here? I think that's pretty much it. You're just going to be doing a lot of getting rid of things, you know, maybe you're going to combine some of the objects together if they have similar attributes, that kind of stuff.
So here's what actually I did. What you've been looking at through all the way through, we had 4 objects, actually had 7. But we went through prioritization before we actually came down to the 4. It was easier to look at everything else as they were smaller. As you can see, this is the map for the 7 objects, and those were the first 7 that we found on the thing, and we just kind of cut it down to 4. What we ended up doing is sitting there and going, well, okay, maybe project management is more of a phase 2 thing. So I'm going to, you know, push tasks down to phase 2. Invoicing. Well, we're not going to do invoicing. I'm going to offload that to some other system, an external system. So I don't need to build it in my app. I'll interface to it somehow. Maybe I'll just send them a spreadsheet and I'll just tell them, I'll go bill it. It's $20. I don't know, but I can offload that. Then what I can start doing is then I will have to go look through and say, okay, having got rid of the invoice had the price, down here in my nested, I would have had, oh yes, has 0 to M invoices. Well, I need to get rid of that. So because I got rid of it, you know, up here, you know, I can actually, you know, bring that down and say, okay, well, he's gone as well. Of course, if it's in a database, you can be marking this in little conditional things, and then you can say, hide all the things that are phase 2. And they just disappear. So, you know, there's a lot of things there. So I could, you know, we did that. And we found, obviously, well, but I need to be able to fill it. So that's why we ended up, you know, kind of just creating a new one that just said, okay, I'm going to just come up with a price for the project. Right. We did that. There are other things that we could just say, you know, guess what? I don't need this attribute. I don't need this object. They can be eliminated, or maybe I could combine things. Maybe I could say, the task and the client, in this case not, but the task and client are the same object. If I can merge them together and just put them into one slightly bigger object, maybe I'll split it later. So yeah, and so I can be merging objects. Does it make sense? I mean, I may have to do some manipulation. Now, the goal is obviously to get your product out to market. Always, right? It's to try to get something that's going to start making you money. So that's how we try and do that. So the prioritization is a little more structured than what I just showed you here. We go through the objects, we go through the relationships, we go through the call to actions, and we go through the attributes. But effectively, what I just did on that chart is the same thing.
And you'd be moving some of the stuff around too, like bringing up some of the attributes to the top if it's more important and all that good stuff.
Well, this is funny. I'm talking about representation. Yeah, okay. We got the designer, the developer talking about representation. So everything we pulled a load of information. We know the objects we're interested in. We know the relationships. We know the attributes, the fields that people are interested in. We also know the priorities. We know what the user is interested in. So we're going to start doing some sketching. And again, this is not the high fidelity. This is trying to make sure that we're hitting the right things. Are we doing what the user is most interested in? And if you ever look at this whole process, we're talking days, maybe a week to do all of this if possible. So you're trying to get a response back from the customer and say, is this the right kind of thing? Because if they turn around and go, no, billing is really important. Oh, good. I haven't wasted a whole lot of time designing a whole load of screens that didn't include billing, right? I've just got how do things tie together? So during the representation, there are four main type of sketching. The landing pages, which would be basically the home page of the app. So that's where you start on. That doesn't kind of have as much structure. It's usually a collection of other pieces. I have lists, the lists of objects. So that's one of the things they're going to be. So if I wanted to see all my active projects, I don't want to see all the projects. I just want to see my active projects. That's going to be a list. And it's going to have items in it, which when I click on it, it might go in and show me a card, or maybe the list has the cards in it themselves. So I could see a list of all of the cards. When you think about a lot of the web pages you go to, and we've got some examples down here, it's cards. And when you click on it, it goes to a detail, right? So think, I don't know, Etsy, you're looking at shirts. And then you kind of you can click on the shirt and it goes to a detail. It tells you the price and how to order it and everything else like that. So that's one of the things we start doing with the sketching. And then we take some of those sketches and we kind of try to link them together to do some kind of prototyping. It's very low fidelity prototyping, but it wants us, and as we say there, we want to start testing the O's, R's, C's, and A's. We want to make sure these are the right things. So just as an example, HelloFresh. Here's a list of meals, right? And the list contains cards, and the cards have the same structure. It's got a picture. It's got a little tag to show this is Hall of Fame. It's got the title and of the dish, the main title, and then obviously maybe a subline because it looks a little bit smaller. And it tells you how long it takes to cook. And it's got a picture, of course, so, oh, I like that. And then when you click on one of those, it comes down to a detail record, which has the same kind of information. It should look kind of the same because, as we said at the beginning, we want them to look the same. We don't want someone to jump from one thing to another and suddenly think they're in a completely different planet, or they don't realize they're in, the same kind of detail record of the card. We want them to be similar. And so I'll just go through these, and then Molly is going to show us how she filled these out. There's a couple of templates. Actually, why don't you talk about the templates? And
yeah, these are some really nice little worksheets that Sophia gave us during the course. So essentially, you would use these and translate that, prioritized object map that we put together. You would translate that onto this page. So for a card design, for example, you're going to take those top 5 to 7 attributes that are listed right under your object in that object map, and just list them out there on that number 1 under attributes. And you're going to think about like what calls to actions might be the most important. Also list a couple of those on there. Then when you're looking over at like number 3, the mini card, this is really something that's just very simple. You don't really want to have anything more than 3 things on there. No calls to action on there. So really when you're looking at the mini card, it sort of represents your nested object that might show up on another object's card. So if you scroll over, Richard, to the one that I did. Yeah.
Which one do you want?
Yeah, that one's good. That's good. Yeah. So this was for the file. These over there on number 1, the attributes, those are all of them listed. It includes the nested objects as well, because those seemed important. So your mini card, you kind of sketch out a couple of ideas of how you might want it to look. Super quick, doesn't have to be anything fancy, obviously. Then you move over to your grid card, and essentially, it should be a blown up version of your mini card. You don't want things moving around all over the place or anything like that. And then your grid card becomes a mini version of the details page. So when you go from your grid card to, let's say you click on that to go to the file's detail page, you kind of want that to be a blown up version of the little grid card. So nothing should be moving around a bunch. It kind of just really play around and figure out like, you sort of prioritize that, hey, the size and date metadata aren't really that important. So we can make them smaller. You might want to include some nested objects. So those would be, right here we have project and designer as a nested object on this file. So that you would basically just be inserting the mini card for that object that you've designed on a different worksheet. And it kind of works really nicely to know exactly, you have this card design, and anytime you're going to use that card for an object, you're just going to go to that. You have it designed already, and you can just place that where you need it. And so the details page, you're kind of listing all the additional attributes that you didn't put on the mini card. So other things that maybe need to show up lower down on the page. I did it for all of these objects, and it's kind of a lot of stuff. If you scroll down a little bit more, we can talk about the list page. Yeah. So here is where you're kind of taking that metadata that you put down in your object map and deciding how you can filter and sort by it. So for the file, we had like an upload date. So you could naturally probably want to default sort by the newest one. And then you always want to do the opposite too. So the oldest, maybe you want to sort by alphabetically. And then we had a size and a type metadata. So those are more, that feels more like a filter. What was like the really good stuff that Sophia said about filtering and sorting? Like sorting, you're going to still see the entire list of all of the objects, and filtering, you're going to narrow it down. Isn't that what she always said?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. So that's a good way to look at the difference between the two of them. And then you might kind of brainstorm like how you want this to appear. There's times where maybe you want it to show up as a map if you're mapping out different state parks or something like that. It's just kind of a good idea to get things rolling of how it might show up on the screen. And then you'll have all of your cards put together, and you can kind of start placing, you could see how everything could come together onto a page with the nested objects within the object and everything else. It's a lot.
So yeah, as Molly was saying, one of the cool things about it is when you're designing the card for the file, don't care about what the response looks like, because you're doing that on another page. And so you can just say, okay, the response is going to go here. Let me design. So you're designing it once. And then ideally, because everyone's reusing it, as opposed to, and I know, every company we've got it, you've got the same card or slightly different variations of the card, probably by a different silo development group. And they all look slightly different. And from a business perspective, that costs money. If you've got the same page or the same object that's actually being coded 3 times, every time you got to do a change, you got to change it in 3 places. And that's a lot of money. So the idea is to try to keep it, oh, I have one place, this is it. So basically, yeah, I mean, I can't believe how quickly Molly put these together. But the idea being is, and you can imagine, you know, the more fields you've got, the more complex it gets. But this is the goal of going from a text document that we started with, finding the objects, putting relationships, and putting all the attributes and the calls to actions, and then ending up. And if you have a look at the color coding that goes all the way through here, so you can kind of trace it backwards and forwards. And then, you know, the next step from these drawings is really to, you know, to try and maybe build a prototype that we can try it out and say, you know, does this really flow? Do these things really work? So just real quick here on the testing, and then we can wrap it up. It almost kept it within the hour. Testing, you know, are the objects recognizable? Are they the ones that the user understands? You know, are we using the right terminology? Make that bigger. Do they connect? You know, are the objects connecting? Can I go from, you know, what makes sense? Can I go from the project to the designer or the project to the file? And are there any relationships missing? Are there any, does moving around the application feel natural, or does it feel very contrived or forced? Are the CTAs relevant, useful, findable? I mean, this is something from user testing, right? You know, it's like, here's a screen. What do you think you should do, right? I don't know. Okay, well, maybe you're using the wrong words, or maybe we got it in the wrong place. All of these things. A key thing is to keep things consistent. Are the right information being displayed? Are we missing stuff that seems to be important? And you know, can they filter and sort the lists that are helpful? I mean, I find this all the time. You know, we build something and then suddenly it's like, I can't get there. You know, I can't get to the object I want as quickly as I want to. So it's kind of a bit annoying. But basically that's the entire flow. Here's a few resources that we've got. If you go to forum.ooux.com, that is a place where all of the certified OUXers and people interested in OUX, you can sign in. It's a Mighty Networks forum. She runs her courses through it as well. So all the certified or running through the certification, you get access to certain groups. They post their homework there. Remember that, Molly?
Yep.
And you post all the things as comments and stuff, and then the mentors go in and they assess it. And it's all done through the forum. It's very sophisticated. Rewiredux.com, that's her company, Sophia Prater, her and her husband, and she's got 2 or 3 employees that kind of work there. And then there is that course. I don't know if we can copy that and put that into the.
I tried.
Oh, you made a slide of it, didn't you?
I put it in
anyway,
I put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So the coupon code UX San Antonio, the course I think at the regular is $79.99. I know it was discounted last week or earlier this week at about $12. She's offering it for $9.99 if you want to do it. It's she did it with Joe Natelli, and it basically covers what we covered here, but in obviously much better. And if you've never seen Sophia talk, I know Sherry has, because she has got so much energy. She is unbelievable. There is a we do a meetup every month. Next week actually is next month is a panel of government users that use OUX. I tell you, I've been amazed by how many people use OUX and how many different ways they use it. So I use it because it helps me from a developer's point of view. But we've got content strategists that are using it. You've got so there's a lady that's using it, and she was defined how a video game. She works for a video game company, so she was putting all the objects and the interactions, and it's like we're all looking at her model and we're going, oh my gosh, you're nuts, you're completely crazy, but it was cool. But I mean, she was talking about games, video games, so that was it. So, but a lot of people use it. They use it different ways. They use different pieces of it, and they adapt it. So, we don't necessarily all agree with Sophia on some things. She does it her way. She's very, very good. And, but I do certain things my own way. So, it,
Yeah.
it's,
I know that I'm not gonna get, I think how I can work it in agile and I can, if it is a design system or a project, or one project or a design system, right? Use it in many different ways.
did I lose,
So much for that. Appreciate it.
did I lose the
Any
sharing?
questions that
Yeah.
we
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Oh.
Adrian, are there any questions in the chat?
I can see them here.
Oh,
Where
there
to
you go.
get the certification done? So you can sign up for the certification course, she's got it self-paced course. If you do the self-paced, you can use that to pay part of the full certification. So you don't actually get certified if you do the self-paced course. But I found going through the self-paced first was huge to when I did the certifications. I'd already done all the videos, the training and stuff like that. Oh, helps immensely. You can do it at your own pace. You do your own project. You go to that the Rewired UX.
Yeah.
It's yeah. That will work. And she's probably not going to do another certification until next summer. She's got a number of things, projects and things working in that we're all kind of in cahoots with. So we're trying to get some of those things done. Adrian.
Hey guys, yeah, I just wanted to say we had one more question, from Uma. I hope I'm saying your name right. When attending interviews, is it mandatory to list all the orcas and make the prototype?
When attending interviews,
And you know what, I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? It's really, really hard for us, who are attending virtually to hear some of the questions that are being asked,
Sure.
in the room.
Sure.
So, I think, Uma, if you want to jump in, I think what, the question is more about, like, when you're going to interviews, sort of showing this process, is that important to hiring managers?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. So I do know that there are more and more companies that are using OUX, and they are bringing on people with OUX knowledge and skills. But it's a pretty rare skill, or knowledge. I mean, Sophia's been doing it since what, 2010, 2012. She's been doing her certification since about 2016 or 2018, up to cohort 9. So she's done about 20 to 40 people each cohort. That's an excellent question. I don't know, Molly, you might be able to answer that question. I don't even know what a designer interview would sound like. So Molly.
I think it's an important skill to showcase. I think I know that Sophia has said that there's a lot more, even like the really like well-known companies really value this. So I think it is going to become something that people hear a lot more of, and people are willing to pay to have people come in and do these sprints for them, at their company for a week. They find enough value in it to want to do that. So I do think it is important to share, and it's good. I think it would look good too on a resume.
And I think that's a good point, Molly, as well, because you know how the design sprints, Adrian, you did a thing on design sprints, some time ago, and we did a workshop on them. And they do, there's a number of companies that do design sprint workshops, and they charge a pretty penny. Well, they've started, Sophia's been doing OUX workshops for different companies. She was recently at the LDS church. She OUX'd the LDS church. So that was kind of an interesting one. And she was there, and there were like 40, 50 people, and she had them looking at the different parts of the religion and pieces and coming up with the objects. And so, yeah, it's definitely getting popular, and I'm just amazed at how many people and how many companies seem to be using it. So now, how detailed you have to explain the process in an interview, I'm not sure. If you're talking to a company that does OUX, and you say OUX, they're probably going to expect a little more justification, proof through terminology and some of the practices.
Very
Or
good,
you might
Richard and
see it
Molly.
as, oh, sorry, what was that?
I was just gonna say thank you both for your expertise tonight. This was more than fascinating. It was mind blowing. There's a lot to take in, and it's
Yeah.
a lot we can dive into too.
It is a
I
lot.
appreciate it.
Well, good. And just if you ever want like a 2-hour, 4-hour workshop or whatever, I mean, I think that's the really, then we would sit here and you would do it, and you can't really do it in about,
In a
What
minute of time.
Yeah.
But we appreciate y'all putting it together like that, because that made it a lot easier to talk.
thank you.
I'm glad.
Awesome. So we've been previewing our next month meetup is actually going to be during the day. So you will have to make plans for Thursday, November the 9th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. On our website, we've added a link to the top of the page. And we have a call for topics and speakers. World Usability Day. We explain a little bit about what it's going to be. We are partnering with the City of San Antonio, Firecat Studio, and Fiesta for the Mind to have an entire day kind of a workshop at the City Towers, which is, if you're in San Antonio, the old Frost Bank Tower, not the new one, but the old one that the city has renovated, and they have taken over the building, and we were doing a site survey on it earlier. It's a great facility for a whole day workshop on World Usability Day. So you can find out those details on the website. I think it will also be virtual as well. Do you know? It will be hybrid, so even if you're not in San Antonio, we'll have links to all the day's activities. And we're just going through planning it right now. As you can see, we have a call for topics and speakers, and you can register and also ask for one of our get our sponsorship packet to contribute as well. I want to say, I'm trying to think of his name, Craig Hopkins, who spoke at our Mission UX conference in 2018. He spoke at the last World Usability Day that we had, which was 2019 before the pandemic. So he is going to be one of the keynote speakers, as well as a few others. Sherry, do you know the names of the other?
Not yet, we don't have anything.
Oh, anything final, okay, so we know Craig for sure, but yeah, still early, but it's a month away, and it's going to be quite, and the city has sponsored it to make the entire workshop free, so that's pretty good. You can go and attend the whole day. And all you need to do is ask for time off and count it as a volunteer day if you want. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Adrian, who will do our Wheel of Fortune door prizes. I always call it Wheel of Fortune.
The Wheel of Names.
Wheel of Names. Oh, yes, sorry. I meant to say will of me.
And the person that runs
Don't- please don't sue me.
than Adrian does for running this one.
All right. Let's see, do we need to, so I have all of the names of the people who have attended virtually. Do we need to add names for people
Sure.
that are on site? Can you start giving me some names?
We have, Ellison,
Allison,
Gustavo?
Gustavo,
Go on, Chris.
Chris,
Chris. You wanna-
is that McD?
Cindy. Cindy,
Cindy?
okay, that's it.
Okay, wait, is McD Chris?
No,
We have
Okay.
two, we have McD and Chris, two different people.
All right. I was just trying to make sure McD was not trying to cheat. you.
You know him, he's always trying to get in fight.
Right, okay.
Oh,
Okay, all right, so I'm going to spin the,
and
Wheel
what
of
this
names.
is for a door prize.
This is for a door prize.
Oh, look, Cindy.
Cindy,
Look, we lost connection. Cindy won.
Cindy is our winner, so Cindy, if you can just give your email information to Bob. We will email you a gift certificate for, it's either Amazon or was it
Rosenfeld.
O'Reilly? Rosenfeld.
Rosenfeld.
Media. Yes,
Oh,
Thank you.
congratulations.
yeah, she helped organize the party we had with Rosenfeld himself, remember? Yeah,
Come close.
we met the man.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you everybody for attending. Bob, do we have a final? So that final pretty slide there. And I know we all ran over a little bit, kind of speak loud so y'all can hear me. Is that okay?
might need to come over here.
Yeah, I know we ran over a little bit. I thank y'all so much for your patience in getting started. And I want to invite y'all to come out to the November event, either if it's hybrid or in person. If you can come out in person, that'd be great. Especially if you live in San Antonio, it's a great way to network. And it's all free and you'll be served lunch. So 10 to 4, we'll feed you. So, but I really appreciate everybody coming tonight and look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank y'all so much.
Right on cue, gracias, how about that?
Gracias. There you go.
Thanks, guys.
An iPad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Molly.
Bye-bye.